So now we are going to hear all about Odysseus's adventures, and books 9 through 12 are really the most famous books. It's what most, when movies and films are made of the Odyssey, children's stories, even the collections book for ninth grade for freshman year. The Cyclops is in that story, very famous story, and some of the other more famous stories as well. He'll sail through what's called the Scylla and Charybdis, which made it into one of Sting's songs. I don't know if you know who Sting is, um, but there's but the other really cool thing about books 9 through 12, and in just from what we would call in literature a narrative tour de force, is that Homer is dropping into first person. So as he was narrating books 1 through 8 in third person narrative, periodically he would take on the voice of Odysseus and speak Odysseus's thoughts so we could hear Odysseus's inner thoughts and dialogue. And he did that from time to time. But now, books 9 through 12 are going to be all in Odysseus's voice. So, what the bard has to do and what he has to be really careful doing is never to allow himself as Odysseus, as first person, to have any omniscient understanding of anything going on around him. So, it's a really cool way to structure the narrative. The other thing that is also really interesting about the book so far is the plot structure. And we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to book 13 and it starts to become more chronological. But here we're going to have these books 9 through 12. They're going to be flashbacks. So we're going to go back 20 years to when Odysseus left Troy. Book 9, that's on page 143, New Coasts and Poseidon's Son. Now remember, Odysseus has not told the Phaeacians or King Alcinous who he is. Alcinous finally said, after that third epic simile and the bard Demodocus singing about Odysseus and the Trojan horse, that's what made Odysseus just start to sob. And Alcinous finally says, okay, enough. Who are you? Where did you come from? Tell us all your tales. And book 9 begins with Odysseus's answer. And Odysseus is finally going to tell them who he is. And it's kind of nice because he knows now that they know who he is. Up until now, he's had to keep his identity secret because, what if they didn't know who he was? What if they thought that someone else had gotten credit for the Trojan horse? But now they know who the great Odysseus is, so the timing is just perfect. Page 145. Now this was the reply Odysseus made. Alcinous, king and admiration of men, how beautiful this is to hear a minstrel gifted as yours, a god he might be, singing. There is no boon in life more sweet, I say, than when a summer joy holds all the realm, and banqueters sit listening to a harper in a great hall, by rows of tables heaped with bread and roast meat, while a steward goes to dip up wine and brim your cups again. Here is the flower of life, it seems to me. But now you wish to know my cause for sorrow, and thereby give me cause for more. In other words, it's going to cause him pain to tell his story again. What shall I say first? What shall I keep until the end? The gods have tried me in 1,000 ways. But first my name, let that be known to you. And if I pull away from pitiless death, friendship will bind us, though my land lies far. I am Laertes' son, Odysseus. You could just imagine the gasp in the hallway, right? In Alcinous' hallway. Men hold me formidable for guile in peace and war. This fame has gone abroad to the sky's rim. Okay, now what he's going to need to do is to tell his story, and he will. 4 hours. Remember, it's 1 hour per book. So for 4 hours, he is going to unfold all of his great wanderings and tales. He's going to need to charm them and to impress them, because in this day and age, people who are guests and who bring stories leave with guest gifts. Odysseus is going to need a lot of guest gifts because he lost so much plunder from Troy. And then we'll see what happens as we get towards the end. But for now, um, let's go to the top of page 146. I'm going to read this little section up here, and then I'll tell you what we'll do for the rest of it. My home, he explains, is on the peaked sea mark of Ithaca under Mount Neon's wind-blown robe of leaves, inside of other islands, Dulichion, Same, wooded Zacynthus, Ithaca being most lofty in that coastal sea, and northwest, while the rest lie east and south. A rocky isle, but good for a boy's training. I shall not see on earth a place more dear, though I have been detained long by Calypso, loveliest among goddesses, who held me in her smooth caves, to be her heart's delight. As Circe of Aiaia, the enchantress, desired me, and detained me in her hall. But in my heart I never gave consent. Where shall a man find sweetness to surpass his own home and his parents'? In far lands he shall not, though he find a house of gold. Now he says, where shall I start? Where shall I begin? So where does he begin? He talks about being from Ithaca. But then he also says, by the way, I've been on Calypso's island, and they all know who Calypso is, and they're going to be like, what? You are on whose island? You are, and she detained you because she wanted you? Wait, you are on Circe's island, and she wanted you too, and she detained you? In other words, two famous nymphs desired you for themselves? Oh, I can't wait to hear about this. So that is the whole reason for his throwing those little pieces of information in there. Imagine if one of your friends came back and said, hey, I just hung out with, so and so, some big star, some big famous celebrity. And you would definitely say, okay, well, I want every detail. What I want you to do right now is I actually want you to take your physical finger and your book. Hopefully your book is open and you're not just walking around listening to this, because you do have some questions to answer. But I want you to take your finger and, starting on this second stanza, line 42, I want you to take your finger and run it down the bottom of 146 and the top of 147 and stop at that top stanza right there. You're going to stop right there. Odysseus is going to say, I'm only going to paraphrase these, but you can pause this at any time and read on your own. Odysseus is going to say that after they left Troy, they went to Ismarus, and there they conducted a raid of that city. Ismarus was an ally of Troy's. Whatever we think of in today's day and age, we can't judge ancient cultures for their behaviors and norms of society and their rules of engagement and war. After you conquered a city, you could go, especially a main city, you could go and conquer their allies, because now that main city wouldn't be there to help them. And the goal in this day and age was to build wealth. And so they would conquer cities to gain land and to build wealth. Well, once Helen was gone, Odysseus is like, well, let's go to Ismarus. So he takes his men there, and they go to Ismarus, and they plunder the town a little bit. They kill some men, they enslave some women, they drink some of their wine. They take actually some really great wine, and they eat some of their sheep and butcher some of the sheep and eat them. And the men want to get more. They want to linger there. And Odysseus is like, we need to get going. We need to get going. And at the top of 147, we see that the people from the town came out. They're Cacones. The people from the town come out and kill 72 of his men. When they ship off, 6 benches were left empty. Okay, now take your finger back again. And in this middle stanza, you're just going to run your finger down the middle page of the middle stanza. This is Zeus and the 3 days. This is Zeus not allowing them to land anywhere because Zeus sends a storm. So it's been a few days, and then they catch sight of shore, and then that doesn't work. At the bottom of page 147, I want you to start your finger there. And I want you to run your finger all the way down so you're actually physically touching the page. And as you go all the way down 147, turn the page and go to the top of 148, and then finish running your finger down to this stanza. If you ever want to pause, like I said, you can, and now would be a good time. If you just want to read really briefly what happens on the island of the Lotus Eaters. I'm thinking the lotus is kind of like poppies or opium. And when the men land on this island, um, the people from that island have forgotten all their woes and cares, and they eat lotus. That's all they do. It's like they're completely drugged. It's probably like an opium den, an ancient version of that. And so the men who go and scout out this land don't come back, and they don't want to return. And Odysseus thinks, I got to get these guys out of here as fast as possible because I don't want to be stuck here. The next thing I want you to do on page 148 is take your finger again, and on this second stanza right here, I don't know if you can see because it is kind of far away. On the second stanza on page 148, starting at line 113, in the next land we found were Cyclopes, giants, louts, with a law to bless them. So this is all the Cyclops' island. So what's going to happen is they see the island, they know that something's going on there. They park their ship on a little neighboring island, and the description goes, oh boy, somebody could have really built up this little island. They could have annexed it or connected it to the big island, but obviously nobody wants to be near this Cyclops' island. So if you take your finger from line 113 and you go all the way down page 148, top of 149, all the way down to the bottom of 149, top of 150, okay, and then you're going to stop at the top at around line 180, 12, but just at the top there, but after sundown, we'll do that. So what happens is he's like, I want to go check out that island over there. So he gets some men, he gets on a ship, he pulls this ship up to the shore, and then this is what he says, page 150 at the top. But after sundown in the gathering dusk, we slept again above the wash of ripples. When the young dawn with fingertips of rose came in the east, I called my men together and made a speech to them. Old shipmates, friends, the rest of you stand by. I'll make the crossing in my own ship. I got a little bit ahead of myself there just a minute ago. Now they're making the crossing to the island with my own company and find out what the mainland natives are, for here we go, for they may be wild savages and lawless, or hospitable and God-fearing men. All right, so let's just take a look at this. We're going to pause here. Do you remember when he first spoke these lines, or when he last spoke these lines? They were when he washed up on the land of Scheria, and it was the island of the Phaeacians that lived there. And he says, my goodness, are they going to be wild savages and lawless, or are they going to be hospitable and God-fearing men? Strangers, are they going to be strangers to courtesy? Well, guess what? The first time he said those lines was on the Cyclops' island 20 years ago. Remember, he's speaking to the Phaeacian audience. He's saying this is what happens when we left Troy. When he washes up on Scheria, he gets the best Cynia, the best care possible. When he washes up on the island of the Cyclops, he's going to get the worst care possible. At this I went aboard and gave the word to cast off by the stern. My oarsmen followed, filing into their benches by the rowlocks, and all in line dipped oars in the gray sea. So they row across the sea, they row onto the mainland, they pull their ship up onto the shore, and then from there Odysseus selects 12 fighters to come up with him, because what they do is they see the opening of a cave on the Cyclops' island. Now, one of the things that they noticed as they scanned the island before, and he also knows this now, so he's looking back and filling in more information, is that in all of the mountains that are on this island, in each one there's a cave. In each cave there's these huge Cyclopses with one eye. Each has a wife and a child. Some of them are single. The cave of this man they're going to go into, or this Cyclops, is single. And so he knows that already as he's describing this to his Phaeacian audience. And when they pull up on the shore, he picks 12 men and he goes, let's go up to that cave right there. Okay, so from there, you're on page 150, line 194, and I'm going to ask you to take your finger as we rode on right there. I want you to run your finger down all the way, page 150, go to the top of 151, run your finger down until you see this little line off to the right, a wineskin full I brought along. Do you see that? right about just the third down from the page. Now, he's thinking, I'm going to need something here. Now, he's probably bringing a gift because, guests are supposed to bring gifts. Um, but he's thinking he might need this excellent wine that he has to use in his favor if he gets into any trouble. So here we go. I'm going to start reading here. A wineskin full I brought along, and victuals in a bag. For in my bones I knew some towering brute would be upon us soon, all outward power, a wild man, ignorant of civility. We climbed then briskly to the cave, but Cyclops had gone afield to pasture his fat sheep. So we looked round at everything inside. So now they're up in the cave and they're looking at everything inside the cave. So we looked around at everything inside, a drying rack that sagged with cheeses, pens crowded with lambs and kids, so that's baby sheep, baby goats, each in its class, firstlings apart from middlings, and the dewdrops are newborn lambkins penned apart from both. So everything is very organized in this cave. Probably stinks in there because the animals are all, dropping their droppings. Then vessels full of whey were brimming there, bowls of earthenware and pails for milking. My men came pressing round me, pleading, why not take these cheeses, get them stowed, come back, throw open all the pens and make a run for it. We'll drive the kids and lambs aboard. We say, put out again on good salt water. The men say, Odysseus, we got to get out of here. Let's go. I don't want to be here when this guy gets back. Ah, how sound that was, yet I refused. I wished to see the caveman, what he had to offer. No pretty sight it turned out for my friends. Top of 152. We lit a fire, burnt an offering, and took some cheese to eat, then sat in silence around the embers waiting. When he came, he had a load of dry boughs on his shoulder to stoke his fire at supper time. He dumped it with a great crash into that hollow cave, and we all scattered fast to the far wall. Then over the broad cavern floor he ushered the ewes he meant to milk. Those are the sheep. He left his rams and he-goats in the yard outside and swung high overhead a slab of solid rock to close the cave. 24 four-wheeled wagons with heaving wagon teams could not have stirred the tonnage of that rock from where he wedged it over the door sill. So he comes inside, he brings his ewes, his big fluffy female sheep that he's going to milk, and then he takes this huge massive boulder and he sets it down in the doorway, in the door sill, so that to close himself off from the rest of the world. But we'll see what happens there. Next, he took his seat and milked his bleating ewes. Line 266. A practice job he made of it, giving each ewe her suckling, thickened his milk, then into curds and whey, sieved out the curds to drip in withy baskets, and poured the whey to stand in bowls, cooling until he drank it for his supper. When all these chores were done, he poked the fire, heaping on brushwood. In the glare he saw us. These little men, now tiny compared to this huge Cyclops, are hiding in the corner. And he, in the glare of the fire, he saw the men. Strangers, he said, who are you and where from? What brings you here by seaways? A fair traffic? Or are you wandering rogues who cast your lives like dice and ravage other folk by sea? We felt a pressure on our hearts and dread of that deep rumble and that mighty man. Just his voice alone made them terrified. But all the same I spoke up in reply. We are from Troy, Achaeans blown off course by shifting gales on the great South Sea, homeward bound, but taking routes and ways uncommon, so the will of Zeus would have it. We served under Agamemnon, son of Atreus. The whole world knows what city he laid waste, what armies he destroyed. Everybody's heard the story of Troy, and we beat him. It was our luck to come here. Here we stand, beholden for your help or any gifts you give, as custom is to honor strangers. We would entreat you, great sir, have a care for the gods' courtesy. Zeus will avenge the unoffending guest. He says it's custom to honor strangers, as we know, Xenia. However, if you don't, Zeus will probably curse you in some way. He answered this from his brute chest, completely unmoved. You are a ninny. That means you're a Ding dong, you're a dingbat. You're an idiot, really. Or else you come from the other end of nowhere telling me, mind the gods. We Cyclopses care not a whistle for your thundering Zeus or all the gods in bliss. We have more force by far. I would not let you go for fear of Zeus, you or your friends, unless I had a whim to. Tell me, where was it now you left your ship around the point or down the shore, I wonder? He thought he'd find out, but I saw through this and answered with a ready lie. My ship? Poseidon Lord, who sets the earth a-tremble, broke it up on the rocks at your land's end. A wind from seaward served him, drove us there. We are survivors, these good men and I. He's not going to tell where his ship is or where all of his other ships are. Neither reply nor pity came from him, but in one stride, bottom of 153. He clutched at my companions and caught two in his hands like squirming puppies to beat their brains out, spattering the floor. Then he dismembered them and made his meal, gaping and crunching like a mountain lion. Everything, innards, flesh, and marrow bones. He's a cannibal. Well, I guess he doesn't eat other cyclopses, but he's, yeah. Ugh. We cried aloud, lifting our hands to Zeus, powerless, looking on at this, appalled. But Cyclops went on, filling up his belly with man flesh and great gulps of whey, then lay down like a mast among his sheep. Boom. Passed out drunk, feeding on men and drinking whey and flesh. My heart beat high now at the chance of action, and drawing the sharp sword from my hip, I went along his flank to stab him where the midriff holds the liver. I had touched the spot. In other words, he was just getting ready when sudden fear stayed me, held me back. If I killed him, we perished there as well, for we could never move his ponderous doorway slab aside, so we were left to groan and wait for morning. How are we going to get out? If he kill him, how are they going to remove the stone? They would be left in the cave to die. When the young dawn with fingertips of rose lit up the world, the Cyclops built a fire and milked his handsome ewes, all in due order, putting the sucklings to the mothers. Then, his chores being all dispatched, he caught another brace of men to make his breakfast, and whisked away his great door slab to let his sheep go through. But he behind reset the stone as one would cap a quiver. He takes all of his sheep outside, then he puts the stone back to cover up the door. There was a din of whistling as the Cyclops rounded his flock to higher ground, then stillness, and now I pondered how to hurt him worst, if but Athena granted what I prayed for. Here are the means I thought would serve my turn. A club or staff lay there along the fold, an olive tree, olive is the branch, the symbolic tree of Athena. Olive tree, felled green and left to season for Cyclops' hand. And it was like a mast, so it's huge, a lugger of 20 oars, broad in the beam, a deep sea-going craft might carry. So long, so big around it seems. So it's like this huge, branch mast of a tree that's just massive, all right, that's there on the floor of the cave. Now I chopped out a 6-foot section of this pole and set it down 6 foot. We know what 6 feet is now, don't we? Um, it's It's the Corona branch. Um, uh, 6 foot social distancing. All right, I'll stop. Now I chopped out a 6-foot section of this pole and set it down before my men who scraped it. And when they had it smooth, I hewed again to make a stake with pointed ends. So he's carving the end of this huge branch to make a stake, to make it really pointed. I held this in the fire's heart and turned it, toughening it, then hid it well back in the cavern under one of the dung piles in profusion there. So in profusion means there's a ton. So there's tons of piles of the animal dung all over. So he takes this big, huge 6-foot like spear, massive mast with this pointy edge, and he hides it under the dung piles. Now came the time to toss for it. Who ventured along with me? Whose hand could bear to thrust and grind that spike in Cyclops' eye when mild sleep had mastered him? As luck would have it, the men I would have chosen won the toss. 4 strong men, and I made 5 as captain. So he said, I need 4 more of you, and we all have to lift up this mast and thrust it into the Cyclops' eye. That's the plan. At evening came the shepherd with his flock, his woolly flock. The rams as well this time entered the cave. By some sheep-herding whim or a god's bidding, none were left outside. He hefted his great boulder into place and sat him down to milk the bleating ewes in proper order, put the lambs to suck, and swiftly ran through all his evening chores. Then he caught 2 more men and feasted on them. My moment was at hand, and I went forward, holding an ivy bowl of my dark drink, looking up, saying, Cyclops, try some wine. Here's liquor to wash down your scraps of men. Taste it and see the kind of drink we carried under our planks. I meant it for an offering if you would help us home, but you are mad, unbearable, a bloody monster. After this, will any other traveler come to see you? He seized and drained the bowl, and it went down so fiery and smooth. He called for more, gulp, gulp, gulp with the wine. Give me another, thank you kindly. Tell me, how are you called? I'll make a gift will please you. Even Cyclops knows the wine grapes grow out of grassland and loam and heaven's rain. But here's a bit of nectar and ambrosia. In other words, this wine is so good, it's like it's made for the gods. 3 bowls I brought him, and he poured them down. I saw the fuddle and flush come over him. Then I sang out in cordial tones, Cyclops, you ask my honorable name. Remember the gift you promised me, and I shall tell you. My name is, top of 156. My name is Nobody. Mother, father, and friends. Everyone calls me Nobody. And he said, Nobody's my meat then after I eat his friends. Others come first. There's a noble gift now. The gift that I'm going to give you, I'm going to eat you last. Nobody. Now, why would Odysseus say this? Well, Odysseus is crafty. He's formidable in guile, in peace, and in war. Well, he's kind of like in a little mini battle zone now. So that's what he does. All right. We'll see how that helps him in a little bit. Even as he spoke, the Cyclops, he reeled and tumbled backward, his great head lolling to one side, and sleep took him like any creature. Drunk, hiccuping, he dribbled streams of liquor and bits of men. Now, by the gods, I drove my big hand spike deep in the embers, charring it again, and cheered my men along with battle talk to keep their courage up. No quitting now. The pike of olive, green though it had been, reddened and glowed as if about to catch. So they put it back in the fire. I drew it from the coals, and my 4 fellows gave me a hand, lugging it near the Cyclops, as more than natural force nerved them. Okay, so they needed a supernatural force to help them carry this thing. Straight forward they sprinted. So we all sprinted, we lifted it up and rammed it deep in his crater eye, and I leaned on it. And here's an epic simile. Turning it as a shipwright turns a drill in planking, having men below to swing the 2-handled strap that spins it in the groove. So that's what they did. They were like just really working it into that eye. So with our brand, we bored that great eye socket while blood ran out around the red-hot bar. Eyelid and eyelashes were seared. The pierced eyeball hissed, broiling, and the roots popped. Ooh, it's pretty descriptive. In a smithy is where a blacksmith works. One sees a white-hot axe head or an adze plunged and run in a cold tub. They'll have iron like when they're making a horseshoe. You've probably seen it on film if you don't know it personally. They'll make a horseshoe. They'll make the iron really hot and they'll bend it, and then they'll put it in the heat and fire until it's glowing hot, and then they'll plunge it into the cold. Okay, so remember that's what they did first with the mast, is they got it really hot. So in a smithy, one sees, bottom of 156, one sees a white-hot axe head or an adze plunged and wrung in a cold tub, screeching steam the way they make soft iron, hale and hard. Hale is the word for strong. Just so that eyeball hissed around the spike. So the Cyclops gets 2 back-to-back epic similes. The Cyclops bellowed and the rock roared round him, and we fell back in fear. Clawing his face, he tugged the bloody spike out of his eye, threw it away, and his wild hands were groping. Then he set up a howl for Cyclopses who lived in caves on windy peaks nearby. So some heard him, and they came by diverse ways to clump around outside and call. So he's screaming. So it's like he's going outside, because it says here, the rock roared round him, and we fell back in fear. So he pulls the rock back, he walks outside, and he's crying, and he's screaming for the other Cyclopses to come help you. What ails you, Polyphemus? Polyphemus is his formal name. Why do you cry so sore in the starry night? You will not let us sleep. Surely no man's driving off your flock. No man has tricked you, ruined you? Out of the cave, the mammoth Polyphemus roared and answered, nobody's tricked me. Nobody's ruined me. To this rough shout they made a sage reply. Ah, well, if nobody has played you foul there in your lonely bed, we are no use in pain given by great Zeus. Let it be your father, Poseidon Lord, to whom you pray. We found this out in the very beginning, that Polyphemus, the Cyclops, his father is Poseidon. So now some pieces are coming together for you, right? All right, so here's the great trick. When they're like, who's hurting you? And he says, nobody is hurting me, because Odysseus gave his name as nobody. So saying, they trailed away, and I, Odysseus says, was filled with laughter to see how like a charm the name deceived them. Now Cyclops, wheezing as the pain came on him, fumbled to wrench away the great door-stone, and squatted in the breach with arms thrown wide for any silly beast or man who bolted, hoping somehow I might be such a fool. But I kept thinking how to win the game. Death sat there huge. How could we slip away? So now he's right in the doorway. How are they going to get past him in the doorway? I drew on all my wits and ran through tactics, reasoning as a man will for dear life, until a trick came and it pleased me well. The Cyclops' rams were handsome, fat, with heavy fleeces, a dark violet. I am on the top of page 158. 3 abreast, I tied them silently together, twining cords of willow from the ogre's bed, then slung a man under each middle one to ride there safely, shielded left and right. So he put 3 sheep together, took twine, corded them all together, and then stuck one of his men underneath the sheep to hang on to the cording underneath all of the sheep. So 3 sheep could convey each man. I took the woolliest ram. So 3 sheep could convey each man. 158, line 470 at the top. So 3 sheep could convey each man. I took the woolliest ram, the choicest of the flock, and hung myself under his kinky belly, pulled up tight with fingers twisted deep in sheepskin ringlets for an iron grip. So breathing hard, we waited until morning. Okay, so that's what they're doing, and they wait until morning comes. When dawn spread out her fingertips of rose, the rams began to stir, moving for pasture, and peals of bleating echoed round the pens, where dams with udders full called for milking. Blinded and sick with pain from his wound, the master stroked each ram, then let it pass. But my men riding on the pectoral fleece, the giant's blind hands, blundering, never found. Boy, there's syntax there that's all messed up, because this is all messed up. In other words, it's completely like out of order, just like everything is out of order here. The Cyclops, the men are underneath the sheep. The Cyclops is feeling the fleece to make sure there's no men coming out, and then he lets the sheep go out. Last of them all, my ram, the leader, came, weighted by wool and me with meditations. The Cyclops patted him, and then he said, Sweet cousin Ram, why lag behind the rest in the night cave? You never linger so, but graze before them all, and go afar to crop sweet grass, and take your stately way, leading along the streams until at evening you run to be the first one in the fold. Why now so far behind? Ram, my little ram. You see, he's the first one always out the door, and he goes way off. But he's like, why are you lagging behind? Can you be grieving over your master's eye? That carrion rogue and his accursed companions burnt it out when he had conquered all my wits with wine. Nobody will not get out alive, I swear. Oh, had you brain and voice to tell where he may be now, dodging all my fury. Bashed by this hand and bashed on this rock wall, his brains would strew the floor, and I should have rest from the outrage. Nobody worked upon me. He sent us into the open then, close by. I dropped and rolled clear of the ram's belly, going this way and that to untie the men. So he's untying all of them, and he drops off the ram, and now they're out of the cave. With many glances back, we rounded up his fat, stiff-legged sheep to take aboard, and drove them down to where the good ship lay. We saw as we came near our fellows' faces shining. Then we saw them turn to grief, tallying those who had not fled from death. I hushed them, jerking head and eyebrows up, and in a low voice told them, Load this herd, move fast, and put the ship's head toward the breakers. They all pitched in at loading, then embarked and struck their oars into the sea. Far out, as far offshore as shouted words would carry, I sent a few back to the adversary. O Cyclops, would you feast on my companions? Puny am I in a caveman's hands. How do you like the beating that we gave you, you damned cannibal, eater of guests under your roof? There's an epithet for you. Zeus and the gods have paid you. Look at that cockiness. We call it hubris, but I'm going to show you what hubris is really like, and this term hubris is going to be one that we'll revisit throughout this book and also through some of the other works that we're going to look at. The blind thing in his doubled fury broke a hilltop in his hands and heaved it after us. So broke the top of the hill off and threw it at the little ship. Ahead of our black prow it struck and sank whelmed in a spuming geyser, a giant wave that washed the ship's stern foremost back to shore. I got the longest boat hook out and stood fending us off with furious nods to all to put their backs into a racing stroke like, hurry up and get the heck out of here. Row, row, or perish. Bottom of 159. So the long oars bent, kicking the foam sternward, making head until we drew away and twice as far. Now when I cupped my hands, he's getting ready to say something. I heard the crew in low voices protesting, God's sake, Captain, why bait the beast again? Let him alone. Top of 160. That tidal wave he made on the first throw all but beached us, all but stove us in. Give him our bearing with your trumpeting. He'll get the range and lob a boulder. Like you're going to get us killed. Aye, he'll smash our timbers and our heads together. I would not heed them in my glorying spirit, but let my anger flare and yelled. Cyclops, if ever mortal man inquire how you were put to shame and blinded, you tell him. Odysseus, raider of cities, took your eye, Laertes' son, whose home's on Ithaca. So here's the thing. In Odysseus's desire for glory, that glorying spirit, that kleos that permeates the Iliad, this desire to be known by everybody and known by the world, he doesn't want to just have his, Cyclops say, or Polyphemus say, well, nobody blinded me. He wants everybody to know who he is. So he gives him his name. He tells him who he is. Just in case he doesn't really know who Odysseus is, he tells him who his father is, Laertes' son. And he also tells him where he lives. Not a good thing to do for the son of Poseidon. Not the best information to give out. At this, he gave a mighty sob and rumbled. Now comes the weird upon me spoken of old. A wizard grand and wondrous lived here, Telemus, a son of Eurymus, great length of days he had in wizardry among the Cyclopes. And these things he foretold to come, for time to come. In other words, he prophesied this. My great eye lost and at Odysseus's hands, but always I had in mind some giant, armed in giant force, would come against me, but you, small, pitiful, and twiggy, you put me down with wine, you blinded me. Come back, Odysseus, and I'll treat you well, praying the god of earthquake to befriend you. Remember, the god of earthquake is Poseidon. His son I am, for he by his avowal fathered me, and if he will, he may heal me of this black wound, he and no other of all the happy gods or mortal men. Few words I shouted in reply to him. If I could take your life, I would, and take your time away, and hurl you down to hell. The god of earthquake could not heal you there. So, when you hear the word hubris used in general terms, it's used for arrogance and pride. But the term hubris in ancient Greek language has a stronger meaning. And it is when someone thinks that they are equal to or greater than the gods. And here is where Odysseus's lack of caution, lack of rhetoric, lack of humility gets him into trouble. And he says, if I could take your life, I would, and take your time away, I would kill you, I would hurl you down to hell, and even Poseidon couldn't heal you there. And so now Odysseus has just made himself equal to or even greater than Poseidon. And that is a no-no. At this he stretched his hands out in his darkness toward the sky of stars, the Cyclops did, and prayed to Poseidon. And Poseidon always answers the prayers of his children. O hear me, Lord, blue girdler of the islands, if I am thine indeed, and thou art Father. Grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, never see his home. And in case you don't know who that is, Laertes' son. And in case you don't know where he lives, I mean who kept his hall on Ithaca. So all of Odysseus's naming of himself is coming back to haunt him. Should destiny intend that he shall see his roof again among his family in his fatherland, far be that day, and dark the years between. Let him lose all companions, and return under strange sail to bitter days at home. Let's pause for just a second. Look at the curse. Okay? He's like, I pray that he would never see his home again. But if he has to see his home again, if that's what fate intends for him, then this is what I pray. 1, far be that day. 2, dark the years between. 3, let him lose all companions. 4, return under strange sail. And 5, to bitter days at home. A 5-fold curse he prays upon Odysseus to Poseidon. In these words he prayed, and the god heard him. Now Polyphemus laid hands upon a bigger stone and wheeled around Titanic for the cast to let it fly in the black-prowed vessel's track, but it fell short just aft the steering oar, and whelming seas rose giant above the stone to bear us onward toward the island. There, as we ran in, we saw the squadron waiting, the trim ships drawn up side by side. Remember, the other ships are on that little island that was across the sea, or the inlet from the mainland. And all our troubled friends who waited, looking seaward. We beached her grinding keel in the soft sand and waded in ourselves on the sandy beach. Then we unloaded all the Cyclops' flock to make division, share and share alike. Only my fighters voted that my ram, the prize of all, should go to me. I slew him by the seaside and burnt his long thigh bones to Zeus beyond the storm cloud, Kronos' son who rules the world. But Zeus disdained my offering. Destruction for my ships he had in store, and death for those who sailed them, my companions. Top of 162. Now all day long until the sun went down, we made our feast on mutton and sweet wine. Till after sunset in the gathering dark, we went to sleep above the wash of ripples. When the young dawn with fingertips of rose touched the world, I roused the men, gave orders to man the ships, cast off the mooring lines, and filing in to sit beside the rowlocks, oarsmen in line dipped oars in the gray sea. So we moved out, sad in the vast offing, having our precious lives, but not our friends. And as Book 10 opens, we're going to see how the Cyclops' curse begins to take effect immediately.